switch your mic on? You gotta get powered up.
All right, can you guys hear us? Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Zach Parrish. I'm the programming librarian here at the Bexley Public Library. A quick note on tonight's program. We are doing this as a hybrid program, so for those in person, welcome. And then for everyone joining either on our YouTube page or on bexleylibrary.org/TV, welcome from home. So any questions at the end, if you wouldn't mind just raising your hand and I will come around with the mic. That way the at-home audience can hear what is asked. And then for those watching at home, if you just want to type into the YouTube chat at any time, we will get those questions answered at the end. I also want to, relevant to tonight's topic, if anyone rides their bike to the library and forgot a lock, we have locks that you can check out at the lobby desk. So just ask us, we'll get you a lock, and your bike will be protected. You check it out. So we check it out. You can lock your bike. We have bike locks out front, and then whenever you're done, just drop it off at the desk, and you're good to go. Yeah. Yep. So also we have a wonderful lineup of programs. So if you haven't already, please grab a program guide. We have some in the back along with some posters for some upcoming programs. Our presenters tonight are Craig Ness and Eric Bjornard. So I'm going to just give a quick intro to them and then turn it over. Craig Ness has been an avid user of public transit and biking for urban mobility ever since living in major cities in the U.S. and abroad. His volunteer work in sustainable transit advocacy includes the Bike-Friendly Bexley Steering Committee, Safe Routes Bexley, and Transit Columbus. He graduated from Wake Forest University with a BA in Sociology and is currently a user experience designer. And Craig resides in Bexley with his wife, 2 sons, and a ferocious 7-pound dog. Eric Bjornard is the co-founder of Rare Mobility, an electronic bike transportation startup. A self-professed infrastructure nerd, Eric has lived in many major U.S. cities while blasting startups into orbit. During that time, he has been convinced that life's better when you leave the car at home. Eric is an advocate for multimodal transportation, working on Bexley's Calm Corridors infrastructure initiative, and his family, Eric, Abigail, and their 2 sons have lived a car-free life in Bexley, or a one-car life in Bexley, in Columbus since 2008, and for the last 7 years, Eric has commuted by e-bike. So I will turn it over, and thank you all for coming out again tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I hope we filled up the bike racks out front. We'll be checking. Thank you to Zach and to the Bexley Public Library for hosting tonight. I also want to thank Green Bexley, who is doing a sustainable September month of events, and this is part of that. So we appreciate being on board for that. So yeah, we're here to talk about how we get around cities and sustainable ways to do so. This is something that my partner tonight, Eric, and I would be talking about anyway on a Thursday night. So it's nice that you're here along for the ride. So tonight we're going to talk about a few things. Give some introductions. We will talk about the why consider going car light or car free, some of the benefits of that, some of the negative factors of driving a car. We will share a lot of different stories and ways that we navigate around Columbus and Bexley in ways that we reduce car dependency. So we'll give you some practical tips. We also have some considerations to share, and we also will have some Q&A at the end. But that being said, we want this to be a casual program. If there's anything that you have along the way to ask us, or you want to chip in with one of your tips or comments, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, no, that's it. I also wanted to thank I think Zach said there were 20,000 on YouTube right now, so thank you all for joining.
Okay, so for starters, my name is Craig. I wanted to give you some fun stats. I've been in Columbus for 6 years. I grew up here originally, and I bounced around a little bit after that. I went to school in North Carolina. I moved to New York and London and San Francisco, and then I bounced back here 6 years ago. And something that I learned from my travels and living in other places is that How you get around a city can have a big effect on your life and your health and your stress levels. And I became very addicted to those ways of getting around that don't involve a car. I now have a family of 4. I have 2 sons that are 7 and 10. My wife, Rebecca, owns a local business here in Bexley called Monarch Acupuncture and Herbs, which is on Main Street near Drexel. And we are a 1-car family, which is one more than I'd like to have, but there are times when we need it. And we've been doing that for a long time. When my wife and I lived in San Francisco, we bought our first car, and we've been doing that for 21 years. And tonight I'll tell you about our experiences with that. The car that we do have, I'll transparently share, costs us about $9,000 a year. When you look at maintenance and insurance, upkeep, car payments and whatnot, that's what it averages out to. And that's actually pretty much on par with what I've seen the national average is for someone who owns a newish car. In contrast, instead of the 1 car, we own 9 bikes. I have a bike problem. I have a bike fetish. That's why I'm admitting it tonight. Half of those bikes are mine. It's a fluid number that changes a lot. Usually goes up, and we use them whenever we can. I also take the bus to get around, and when I do, I often take the number 23 route on James Road to go to Easton, where I have an office where I work a couple times a week. But my favorite bus line is the number 2. It's a couple blocks from my house. It goes downtown. I ride it with my kids. Sometimes we take it to events. So that's my favorite one. When I do take the bus, it costs a couple dollars a pop. I don't have a monthly pass. I don't use it enough for that, but it's a reasonable way to get around town.
So if you're ever short on cash, you probably have a few dollars.
I used to have a lot of singles until they changed to an app, but yeah, you're right.
Okay.
All right, so that's my story.
All right, and I'm Eric Bjornard. So my family lives in North Bexley. We're just north of Broad Street. It's me. I've got a wife, an 11-year-old son, and a 5-year-old daughter. So I've got 1 kid in Maryland Elementary School. 1 kid just started Cassingham Middle School, or Bexley Middle School, I guess it's called. And we've been in Columbus for 10 years. I guess like Craig, I've kind of bounced around a lot. Lived in Belgium, lived in Germany, Seattle, New York, Boston. So I've experienced lots of different ways to live, lots of different public transportation. And we've been a 1-car house for 13 years. So that includes New York and Boston and here in Columbus. And things changed quite a bit for me when we moved from downtown Columbus, where we used to live with 1 car. I would walk to the office, which is super convenient. It was like a 10-minute walk. Life is good. When we moved to Bexley 7 years ago, we either needed to get a 2nd car. I tried taking public transportation for a little bit, and it was good, but it wasn't great for me. And so decided it was either get a motorcycle, which I'd had a bunch in the past, or get one of these e-bike things. And I'm really glad I chose an e-bike 7 years ago. This is now the 3rd e-bike that I've got. My wife has, you've probably seen her, or you've probably seen me riding around Bexley. It looks like something you'd sell ice cream out of. There's like a big wooden box on the front with 2 wheels. That's an e-bike, but that's an awesome way to get the kids around Bexley, fun way to get to the pool, fun way to get to grocery store, whatever. It's just a great way to get around. So we've got 2 e-bikes, 1 car. I save way more money on car expenses than Craig because our car is electric, so I don't have to pay for gas. And I ride about 7,000 miles a year. Probably 2,500 of that is on an e-bike getting around. The rest of it is I'll ride a bike like that for exercise, probably 115 miles a week. Actually, it's precisely 115 miles a week so far this year. Yeah, so getting around by bike has just become kind of a daily part of life for me over the last few years since we moved to Bexley. And then for our family to get around Bexley, that's generally how we get around. Our our kind of tendency as we're leaving through the back door is not to grab the car keys, it's to choose which bike lock key you're going to grab. And so if we're taking the car, that's the exception.
Yeah, I remember what I felt was a milestone moment for our family was we were leaving to go to the pool one day, and my kids just automatically got into the bike trailer, and that warmed the cockles of my heart because I've realized that that was just their default now, and I don't want to force this on them, but while they're living with me and I choose the transportation, that's what we do. So that was nice. All right. So wanted to start with the why. Why would someone consider going car-free or car-light? What are the reasons? Eric and I are guessing that you're probably in this room because you're curious about this or you already do this. So we are going to start with more of the heavy doomsday news about cars. Probably this is stuff that is already on your mind or you know. But we do think that there are some things that go beyond what most people realize as far as the correlations between car usage and people's health. Besides the obvious things of carbon emissions, there's also links to asthma rates in children who breathe the air that car exhaust emits, and that leads to more missed school time. There are correlations to obesity in car usage as far as the town and if there's a lack of public transit and a lot of car usage, obesity rates go up. There's higher rates of stress and anxiety.
Yeah, within 2 hours of a car commute, your risk of heart attack I think it's doubled for like the 2 hours after a car commute, just from the stress of the car commute. It's crazy. I've got a very dry book I could lend somebody if you want to dive deeper into that.
There's also a connection to social isolation. A lot of people drive themselves. The stats that I've heard in Columbus is that for downtown workers, over 80% of them drive in a car, single-use occupancy by themselves, which is more isolating. Also, it increases the range of people living in more rural areas, which can also be more isolating and not as connected to a community.
Oh yeah, you're less likely to vote. You get home later, so you don't know your neighbors as well. You don't trust your neighbors the same way that you would. There's like a whole lot of negatives that people aren't usually thinking about. Yeah, so here are some numbers that I pulled together. So we probably know generally all this stuff, but I figured like some of these numbers would be useful. So first of all, in 2021, 43,000 people were killed in the US by cars. So not by cars, I mean people driving cars. So that's people in cars, that's pedestrians, that's cyclists. Cars are really dangerous. 2021 was a particularly bad year, but it's usually between 37,000 and 40,000 people a year killed by cars. You were mentioning how expensive cars are to own and operate. $804 a month, that's the average cost to own and operate the average used car in the US. That's not like a new Land Rover, that's the average used car. Most families are spending $5,000 a year on fuel. Which, to Craig's point about like car transportation or dependency on cars hitting lower income people harder, if you're making $40,000 a year, $5,000 on fuel is really significant. People spend over 50 hours a year stuck in traffic. That's post-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, it was more like 99 hours a year. I think we're going back up as people are starting to force workers to come back into the offices. And then here in the States at least, most of our greenhouse gas comes from transportation sector. And hopefully everybody in this room respects the science around climate change and global warming, but anything that we can do to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as possible is really important.
Yeah, and I think besides the personal cost of cars, another thing that comes into play is the colossal budgets that we spend maintaining roads. Especially as cars get heavier and bigger, we're spending more and more money on creating roads, and it's a huge part of our municipal budget that could be spent in other ways. Okay, so I think we want to move on from that and talk about the good side. There's
no more skull emojis in the whole book.
So there's a whole heap of benefits that we wanted to talk about as far as reducing car dependency. It can boost your your budget. There's lots of ways you can save money. It can boost your health, and it boosts the health of others. If you are driving, it has an effect on you, but it also has an effect on all the different neighborhoods and people that you drive by. And the people who are affected are disproportionately affected if you are in a neighborhood that is underserved. This is also a good way when you reduce your car usage to connect yourself to your local community. When you walk, when you bike, you can see people. You're not inside of a box which mutes all of your senses. So when I walk and bike, I often see people I know, and it's a good chance to connect to them. We all know it lowers your carbon footprint. There's also a lot of studies that examine how kids get to school and their level of engagement. When you walk or bike to school, your kids are more awake and motivated. I find the same thing when I bike commute as well, as far as my job. It's a great way to support local businesses. When you make your world a little smaller and get your services close by, that money feeds back into the community and not to a big box corporation. And then there's lots of effects on the noise and air pollution. I really don't live that close to Interstate 70, but I hear it every night. And I know that proportionally goes up the closer you get to that highway.
One thing that's not on here that I was just thinking about is the main reason that I don't drive places. My wife and I share a car. I work from home generally now, and I had a meeting in Upper Arlington a couple days ago, and the car was at home. I mean, my wife didn't need it, and I grabbed my bike, not because there was no car, not because I don't want to pay for gas or electrons for the electric car, but because it's enjoyable getting places by bike. And so for me, and I think this applies to most of these other modes of transportation that are not driving a car, riding a bike, I look forward to my commute with a bike. Even on Sunday night, I mean, who looks forward to going to work on Monday morning? I would look forward to my commute on Monday because I'm looking forward to the ride. Same thing with walking. In times in my life where I've had a walking commute, I look forward to that. That's pleasant. No matter what car I've had some cars that I've enjoyed. There's never a day when I drive into the office and then end up thinking to myself, my God, that was a fantastic commute. Just driving to work does not energize the way these other modes can. And even public transportation. I think Craig will talk about his experience a little bit, but living in New York, for me, taking the subway, I read so many books on the subway. Listen to my music, reading books. It's a nice way to get where you're going, whereas driving a car is just soul crushing.
So that is the why. One thing that we wanted to share with you tonight in particular is the how. So we wanted to go through in list mode 10 of the ways that we've reduced car dependency in our lives and share some of the ways we do it in Columbus, which I think we can admit sometimes people don't look at it as a very sustainable transit-friendly city, but there are many ways that you can accomplish this. So starting off, the first one we're going to mention is going local. When my wife and I moved to Bexley 6 years ago, one of the parameters that we put on finding a house here was something that's close to services. We live a couple blocks off of Main Street. It's become a huge part of our life. It was a great decision. There's a play cafe for our kids at the time. We use this gem of a library all the time. There's restaurants, there's our groceries. Our school is half a mile away. Going local has been huge for us. We also looked for places that had mixed-use development and mixed-use zoning. Some of the places that we looked at that were further outside of town were very uniform, which was just houses. The zoning prevented commercial activity in places. So we wanted to go to a place that had that mixed use so that we could live and get our services there as well.
One thought of going local too is not just choosing where to live, because that's a hard thing to change. But choosing where you go on Saturday with your kids for, like, if you want to go out for ice cream, I mean, like, we will choose local opportunities rather than driving to Easton and having lunch at North Star, it's nice to ride our bike down to Kitty's and get pastries. And so there's the option to like choose local as well on a daily basis.
Right. And it also connects you to your local businesses even more. Like, I order sandwiches from Newfangled Kitchen on Main Street, and I go in and I say hi to Laura and her family. And it's a different experience than if I was in a drive-through quickly getting handed a bag of food. So it's nice. The next thing we want to talk about is auditing your trips. So, sometimes it's easy to forget where you need to go on a local or a daily basis because it's just part of a habit or routine. And maybe your habit right now is to use a car for those things. But the places where you buy food or go to school or work or go to the gym or a place of worship, one thing that we wanted to talk about is some stats about how often those are not far. So Eric, do you want to talk about these stats a little bit?
Yeah. So I think the big thing is if you look at this, you can see 64% of all trips are 5 miles or less, 53% 3 miles or less, and you can see 28% are 1 mile or less. We'll talk about e-bikes more in a little bit. E-bikes really do change the game. So I would not have commuted downtown on a regular bike when we moved to Bexley, just because showing up to work, sweating for the next hour or two is just not a good option for me. Or riding in really early, going to a gym, waiting till I cool down and then shower, it just wasn't a good option. But an e-bike made a 5 mile commute or a 10 mile round trip commute downtown super easy for me. And basically, I mean, downtown is 5 miles away. My WeWork office is 5.5 miles away. One startup before that, Ready Robotics, we were at the very north end of Grandview, so that was 10 miles each way. Again, like I'll ride that much on my gravel bike on the weekend for fun, but that's not really appealing for me as a commute. But with an e-bike, it works well. And God, I can't even count how many things that we do as a family that are within a mile. Like, again, we live in North Bexley, so during the summer, we're going to and from the pool about 60 times a day. That's within a mile. Main Street's within a mile, so Starbucks, Kitty's, Roll Bike Shop. You might see me riding around with, like, on a Friday or Saturday night with a couple pizzas on the back of my bike. I'll ride my bike to Papa John's or Rubino's to grab pizza. It's just, I mean, there's so much of our life, when you really start thinking about it, is within a mile or two. And you don't need an e-bike necessarily for that. It's flat here. It's way faster than walking. And actually, on an e-bike, I think it's faster for me if I'm trying to get to Main Street than driving. I don't stop at all the stop signs. But it's just more pleasant, too.
Yeah, there's a P word that comes up, parking, when there's a lot of discussions about cars and transit and bike lanes and lack of parking. I will say, biking is one of the best parking mechanisms I've ever experienced. I always get the best parking spot, and that's actually something that saves time as well. Today, I work out of Easton a few times a week, and today I had to go 3 different places. I had to go to Gap Kids and Trader Joe's and grab some lunch. And I was able to just zip up to all of them, park right in front, do my thing, and carry on. And it was much easier and faster and more enjoyable.
Oh yeah, like WeWork days, for me to drive into WeWork, which again, it's High Street, God, what is it? High Street and State? Yeah, it's by, God, what is it? Anyway, it's half a mile north of the convention center on High Street, maybe a quarter mile. Yeah, exactly, above Town Hall. And so if I would drive there during rush hour, which traffic in Columbus, I mean, having lived in other cities, I don't feel like it's that bad. But it would still take me 15 minutes to drive there, and then I'm parking in a garage a couple blocks away, and then I've got to walk down, walk over, take the elevator up. It ends up taking the same amount of time for me to drive and park as it does to ride an e-bike. And then during the day, once I'm there with my e-bike, like if I've got a meeting in Grandview or if I've got a meeting in German Village, it's suddenly way faster on an e-bike. I just go, like you're saying, exactly where I want to go. I lock my bike up right in front. There's no circling the block for 5 minutes looking for a spot and then giving up and going 3 blocks this way and parking in a garage and paying $10 or whatever. It's free and it's always right in front of where you're going. It's awesome.
Yeah. You also don't get mad at people who are in your way to arrive more grounded. So we've already talked a little bit about commuting by bike, but we wanted to dive into that a little bit further. Another stat to throw at you. Currently, 85% of American workers use a car to get to work, and the vast majority of those do it by themselves. And yeah, that holds true in Columbus as well. Commuting by bike definitely changed my life. It changed my relationship to my job. It is something where, like Eric said, that I look forward to commuting, whether or not it's in the morning or after work.
And Craig hates his job. Hates
Yes, I wouldn't work if I didn't. So I take the Alum Creek Trail from Bexley to Easton. I see a lot of deer. I see a lot of water. I forget what the Japanese phrase is, forest bathing. I do a lot of forest bathing on the way. I listen to podcasts when I'm on the trail. I think about work or I don't think about work, and it's sort of my time and I can zone out. And I remember, as far as the health effects go, I remember there was a hallway that I used to walk down a lot at work, and I was very used to how it felt. You just get into these routines in your life. And after a week of bike commuting, I just remember walking down that hallway and feeling like my body was balancing in a different way, because my body just felt more, I don't know, I could feel the balance and the strength that had happened from using my own power to get to work. So that was a great feeling. And I think I think the mood boost, it's not just something that happens when I get to work, but it's also like at the end of the day, no matter what kind of day I've had, riding home kind of erases that. So that's nice.
But you're right. I mean, there's something about, and I've experienced this too. If I have a walking commute, like in Boston, I had a 20-minute walking commute, and walking commute's kind of the same way. I mean, just breathing fresh air, moving your body, you get there and your brain just feels like it's working better. I feel like that's a benefit of commuting by bike versus instead just thinking really terrible thoughts about the cars that are just cut you off or whatever.
Yep. So next, we wanted to talk a little bit. Actually, do we want to talk about this first, or do you want to go to e-bikes?
Yeah. So Columbus gets a bad rap, and it's probably a pretty fair rap for not being a super bike-friendly city. It's really flat, which is great, but we don't have a ton of bike infrastructure. Like New York, I think, has over 1,600 miles of bike lanes. Austin has added over 200 miles in the last 3 years. So we're not in that category, but I think a lot of people look at or think about the concept of commuting by bike and think, well, the roads that I drive on when I'm trying to commute up here, maybe on Broad Street and up, or it's 670. And the thing that occurred to me the other day is the roads that most people see when you're driving are not the roads that you ride on when you're on a bike. And so Broad is crazy. Anytime I see somebody riding a bike on Broad, I'm like, good luck.
Say a prayer?
Yeah, exactly. I hope it goes well. I don't ride on Broad. I ride on like that top blue line. That's basically, it's Mount Vernon, which turns into Spring. So I think it's 25 miles an hour until it turns into Spring. Bike lane, bike lane, bike lane. And then you're on High Street, or if you're going to German Village, you're riding on the Alum Creek Trail. Bryden is what's it called? It's a bike thoroughfare? Bike Boulevard, yeah, exactly. So that's a 25-mile-an-hour road. There's a lot of bike signage. There's a lot of stop signs. and that makes it inconvenient for cars. Like that's not the road you choose because it's not fast in a car, which means there's not a lot of cars and the traffic flow is really chill. That's a great way to get where you're going. And so if you're in Bexley and let's say you work over here, the routes that you would take are much more pleasant than probably what you're used to experiencing from your car. Even though my commute into downtown is not Craig's forest bathing up Alum Creek Trail.
All right, so we wanted to dig in deep on the e-bike front because these have been a game changer about mobility in cities. And I think Eric is probably the best person to walk through these slides because of his day job and his e-bike habit.
Yeah, so I became a big e-bike nerd 7 years ago when I bought my first one and started commuting to and from downtown. Again, it was motorcycle or e-bike, and the e-bike's been a total game changer for me. It's just so many positives. I didn't do it to save money, but like some stats about, I actually nerded out one day, decided I wanted to calculate, all right, well, how much am I paying for electricity for my commute? So I went and looked at my electric bill and saw how much I was paying for kilowatt hour and did the math. And so basically, for me to commute downtown and back every day costs 3 cents a day for electricity. 3 cents. So if I'm doing that every weekday of the month, so 20 days a month, that's 60 cents a month. Basically, the cost to fill up the e-bike is completely negligible. But that's not the reason that I ride it now or why I started. E-bikes are a total game changer in terms of range. So you don't have to be fit to go 10 or 20 miles on an e-bike. Actually, show of hands, who in this room has ridden an e-bike before? Oh, wow. I love this audience. So I don't need to tell you guys it's like riding downhill all the time and all that stuff. So you get a lot of the benefits. So you have not. You got to try it. It's amazing. Yeah. I know you can try them at Roll has a bunch of e-bikes available. Orbit City. I think we'll talk about that stuff more later. But what's that? Just a normal bike helmet. No. If it's the winter, one of my life hacks, and we're going to talk about gear later, but one of my life hacks is wearing a ski helmet in the winter. And then my ears don't get cold. I have like a flip-down visor. I can wear my glasses without them getting fogged up. It's pretty great. So with an e-bike, you can go a lot farther than you can with a regular bike. And then I have a high heel for no sweat. Yeah, so let's talk about that. So when I was thinking about emojis, my first thought was, well, like it could be a sweat thing with a cross circle and a slash through it. But really, no sweat, what that means for me is, I mean, if I'm meeting somebody for coffee, meeting somebody to watch a World Cup game at Platform Brewing, heading to WeWork to the office, you wear whatever you want, whatever you wear for your normal day, because you're going to show up, you're not sweaty, you're not going to sweat for the next few hours. So whatever you're comfortable wearing, you can comfortably wear on an e-bike, whereas when I'm riding my gravel bike on the weekends, 50 or 60 miles, I'm wearing like dorky spandex and stuff like that, but that's not required for an e-bike. You don't need to be efficient. It doesn't matter if there's a lot of wind hitting you because the e-bike motor does all of the work for you. You get there a lot faster. So that map a couple slides ago, I think Google thought it would take me about 30 minutes or 35 minutes to do that north route to WeWork. It's about 15 to 18 minutes on the e-bike, which is basically almost the same amount of time it would take if I was driving. So e-bikes are super quick. Save a ton of money. We talked about that. E-bikes, if you go and Roll, they've got a handful of models like on their floor right now that are under $2,000, which if you haven't bought an e-bike before, or you're not a total bike nerd like Craig, that's a wild amount for a bike. But if you kind of change your perspective on it and think about it less in terms of, well, it's a bike for exercise and it's a mode of transportation, less than $2,000 is a complete, barely working pile of junk car, or a pretty nice e-bike. So they're actually pretty affordable when you think about them as a transportation option, and they're really cheap to operate. We've talked about parking. One nice thing about exercise is I notice this when I'm commuting. I don't sweat, I don't get to the office, I'm not hot, my pulse rate is not high, but I feel my legs are stronger. And so even without trying to get exercise, you're still getting exercise. And then you have the option, I mean, generally when I'm commuting, like this guy, I can go turbo mode and I'll go 28 miles an hour with hardly any work. Or I can go, on the weekends, I'll ride this with the bike on, so the lights are on, but with no boost, just riding with my family, so I'm not like leaving them in the dust. And you can do anything in between. Like I'll take it for a ride on the trail and use like a medium boost and pedal hard and go 28 miles an hour and get a really good workout and go twice as far as I would with a normal bike. So the exercise is great. But then the main thing for me is, and I don't necessarily think I realized how much I would enjoy getting around by e-bike when I bought it, but there's no going back. There's no scenario in my life where I ever don't have an e-bike. I wouldn't consider like a job if I had to get a second car and commute for half an hour a day. I know my stepdad in California commutes, I think, an hour and a half each way every day. I'm not cool with that, but riding an e-bike is always a pleasant way to get where I'm going.
I think one thing on the price tag that might feel daunting at first is changing your perception of looking at it as a car replacement is something where the price tag just doesn't even compare then. Pays for itself in that regard. You can keep it as long as a car and you don't have to pay all those extra expenses.
Oh yeah. Well, I think maybe some people in here have two cars, and you could start by getting an e-bike with the goal of getting rid of that other car. And I think my guess is if you're like my family or maybe like Craig's family, is you quickly find that having an e-bike really does change the game, and it is really easy to live with just one car if you have an e-bike that can basically get you all around Columbus.
All right.
Oh, these are pictures. So this bike, you might recognize it. It's also right here. What's that?
Oh, yeah.
She doesn't have a name. Yeah, I should name my bike.
Oh, I can't believe it. This is Candy, by the way, since you asked.
Nice. But so they open up new frontiers in terms of like where you can go, where is a bike acceptable versus what needs to be a car trip. Before an e-bike for me, basically, over a few miles really was, it's get in the car and drive. And that has changed. This is our cargo bike in the middle. We can fit up to 4 kids in there, and that's where the kids want to ride. The kids don't want to go in the car. They want to ride in the cargo bike. And if I'm picking up pizza on a Friday night, like they want to ride with me. It's just a fun way to get around. Analog bikes, which is what us e-bike people call bikes that don't have motors, or acoustic if you want. They're great too, and so I took a picture. So this is my wife's other bike, and you might notice here, like that is a huge life hack. It's an old like peach box, and we strapped it to the rear rack, but it makes the bike so much more functional. Like if she's going to yoga, now she can just throw her yoga mat in that box on the back. If she's going to the grocery store, she can throw a couple bags of groceries in there. She always has a space to carry stuff. So whether you have an e-bike or not, I think there are little things like that that can make your bike much more functional. On mine, I've got this pannier here. I've got 2 of them. They roll top, so they're waterproof. I can open them up and fill them with like tennis rackets, soccer balls, I mean, tons of groceries. This bike is not a cargo bike, but it can carry a shocking amount of stuff on it. Just super practical.
Yep.
Or if you have candy, like a water bottle under the seat.
It's, yeah, it looks a little funky back
She was
there.
pretty though, Craig.
Thank you, thank you. All right, I think you covered some of these. Anything else on here?
No, I think we've talked through that stuff.
Yeah.
And it sounds like most people have already ridden an e-bike anyway, so you haven't, you definitely should. Yeah.
All right, next up we want to talk a bit about public transit or multimodal transit. So reducing your car dependency doesn't mean that you have to take public transit. It is nice if it's an option. It is something that I personally work into my routine. Others may be able to as well. We live in a city, it doesn't have the best public transit, but it does exist, and there are ways to make it work depending on where you're going and where you live. What I do personally is, in the morning, I used to bike commute both ways, morning and after work, because I had a gym near my office and I would shower and get ready. I don't have that luxury right now, so oftentimes in the morning what I do is I ride my bike over to James Road and I catch the number 23 Coda. I put my bike on the bike rack in the front, and I sit there and have some me time for 20 minutes. Could zone out, I could maybe even start to get some work done or read. It's great. You also end up meeting people that ride the bus at the same time as you, so that's kind of communal as well. But the multimodal part really helps. If there's a time when I'm at work and I notice a big storm coming in, sometimes I'll ride the bus home, because if it rains, I'm not as worried about the weather factor. And it's also nice if there's a festival downtown or something, you don't want to drive, or parking would be expensive. Sometimes I'll put my bike on the front of the bus, take that downtown, and then I can ride that last mile of the destination. And I live in Bexley. There's 2 or 3 lines that are very convenient for getting downtown. As far as how you can pay for it and figure out the schedule, there is an app called Transit, which is free to download. That has gotten much better at real-time predictions. If there's anyone on the bus that's using that app, it'll give you a real-time prediction of when the bus will show up at your stop. You can also use the app to pay for your trip, so that's built in as well. I will say, Coda, one challenge is that the lines don't run as often as they used to. The frequency went down after COVID. However, they have been much more reliable than they were in the past about showing up when they're supposed to. So I will give it props for that.
I've got a question for you, Craig.
All right.
Is the app good enough that you can, in terms of predicting when the next bus will come, that you can look at that app and then time when you arrive at the bus station based on when the bus is supposed to get there?
There are times when I have to haul out of my house faster because I know it's coming, or times when I can take that extra bite of my waffle. So that's
great.
nice.
That's
Yes.
huge, yeah.
And if they don't have a real-time prediction, then they will default to what the schedule is, which could end up being true, but I like getting that real-time feedback about when it's coming. Yeah. So yeah, that's how I use Coda. When my kids were younger, we used to go to Cosi a lot, and we would take the number 2 from Main Street down to Cosi, and it was just a more fun way to get there.
Yeah.
So that was nice too.
One more thing, like the last mile. Obviously, we've got Kogo in Bexley. There's a ton more Kogo downtown. So if you're taking the bus downtown, then there's like a good chance that there's a Kogo station near you. And then you've got, what is it, Lime and Bird and like all these scooter share around.
Yep.
So there's like the last mile has gotten infinitely better in the last 10 years.
That's a good segue to shared economy resources. So there are way more cars in our country than there are people to use them. And also, our cars are often idle. 95% of the life of a car is spent parked. So instead of having your own car that's idle, you can use the other ones that are out there. We often use Lyft or Uber if we do need to use a car. Sometimes we use bike share or scooters. And we also use car rental when we need to. There are times when maybe my wife needs our one car here and I'm going out of town and I need a car to get there. You can rent a car if you don't have to have it at all times. The amount of money we spend on those things is way, way less than that $9,000 a year we spend on our car. So it definitely adds up money-wise for us. And there's also, you mentioned Kogo. If you do live in Bexley right now, there is a code for a free trial, and I think it lasts 12 months. So if anyone's interested, let me know, and I'll dig that up. For what? Yeah, there's a code where you can get free usage of Kogo bikes for, I believe, a year. Do you know? There we have it.
Awesome.
You can use bike share for free then. Yeah, it's a 30-minute ride. Yeah. Yeah, and that reminds me, thank you, Chet. So when I work at Easton, there are times when I don't have my bike with me, but right outside of my office, there's a Kogo station. So if I'm going to grab lunch, and there are times when I confess I drive my car to work. But if I want to go ride a bike share over to get lunch, then that's also another way that I use it. Okay. The seat is easy to adjust. There's a quick release that goes up and down. And it's a step-through frame, so you don't have to swing your leg way over like Candy here. So this is another hack that kind of goes back to the old carpool days when I was younger, at least. It was more popular. There are a lot of times when I've noticed that my family and I are all going to the same places a lot of our friends and family. Maybe it's a soccer game or a birthday party. So with our one car, sometimes we pool our resources together. Sometimes our friends will take my son and their son to a birthday party, and then I'll do the pickup later. One thing that I like about this is I also get to know my family's friends more. Like my son has lots of friends that he knows at school, and he mentions their name, and then when we carpool to our destination, I get to know them. So this is something that we utilize, which kind of helps the one-car family.
And I will say, we were talking about this earlier, if you got one car, there's definitely more coordination, at least 2 adults and 2 kids. There's more coordination having one car than just 2 cars. There's not just always a car for me to go and hop in. So sometimes I have to check with Abigail and see if I can borrow the car on Saturday to go do something. And maybe it's not available. Maybe she needs to take Thor to a birthday party or something like that. And so she might have to coordinate to get Thor there, or maybe I carpool with a buddy to play tennis or go for a gravel bike ride or something like that. So there's a little bit more coordination involved, but ultimately, like with a little planning and then all these like shared resources and stuff like that, it works out way easier than you would think.
For sure. All right. So the next thing we want to talk about is, what happens when you sell one of your cars, or you have multiple and you sell. A lot of the things that we've talked about here, whether it's an e-bike, or we'll talk about gear in a minute, or using shared economy resources, a lot of that money can be pooled into that, but it's still something you save. And it's really nice to sort of watch my budget lines get reallocated to different things that I'd rather spend my money on. So I know this is sort of an obvious tip here, but when there's a trade-off of putting more money into a 401k, it can really add up. It's also something that if you know that you're close to the end of the life of a car that you own, that's a great time to see if you could ditch it and live without it. And then lastly, it's not just saving you money, it's saving a lot of money for the cost of the roads that are built to maintain your car. Okay, gear up. This one comes up in different ways. One is, Eric and I both get a question a lot when we tell people that we're year-round bike commuters. The first reaction is sort of this fearful look of like, what do you do in the winter?
Or you can, like, not in the winter though, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, yes, there are times when the weather is adverse and I will not ride my bike. But I would say that's maybe less than 5% of the days of the year for me. What I quickly learned is that there is a saying, there's no such thing as bad weather, there's just bad clothing. Once I got the right gear when it comes to gloves and I actually have a fetish for cycling gear as well, so I was stocking up on that and all the different forms of it. It's very effective, it's very well made, and there are ways to make it happen.
Yeah. So I think 2 of the cities in the US that have the highest percentage of people that commute by bike are 2 of the cities that you would say, like, that's crappy weather for commuting. Portland, Oregon, it rains a lot. And then Minneapolis, Minnesota, it is really cold and snowy. And so I think Portland's over 5%. Minneapolis is quickly approaching 5% in terms of bike share usage. And same thing, like if you look at Europe. Over 5% of people who live in Portland commute by bike. Yeah, yep. And I mean, same thing in Europe. Like Copenhagen rains a lot. Rains a lot in Netherlands. Finland is famous for like a high share of bicycle commuting. And it's really cold there. If we think it's cold here, like it's a whole nother ballgame in Finland. So it definitely can be done. I'm a little hardier than Craig, so he's like 95% of conditions are good. The only time that I won't commute by bike is if it is actively snowing heavily and there's actually snow on the ground and it hasn't been plowed yet, or if it's icy out. Those are the only times I won't commute. There was a couple years ago where we had one of those polar vortexes, and it was coming. I remember watching the weather forecast and getting like kind of pumped up for it, just to put a little hair on my chest. And I think that the first day of it was -6 out when I rode to work. And so I'm riding to the west. So I'm riding at 20 miles an hour, and there was a 20-mile-an-hour wind out of the west. So it's a 40-mile-an-hour apparent headwind. And my thought was, like, people walk on the moon and it's -200 degrees or 250 degrees on the moon. If they can do that, I can ride my bike when it's -5. And I was actually hot when I got to work. I was not cold. I like overestimated, and I wore too much stuff, and I was hot. And then everybody thought I was really tough for the rest of my life.
I forgot to mention that benefit.
Yeah, but the right gear makes it easy. Like in the winter, I'm wearing ski gloves. I'm wearing a balaclava, and so I'm covering the bottom half of my face. Or I wear a ski helmet, which makes a big difference. A bike helmet, your ears are exposed. Ski helmet, I've got like the flaps that cover my ears. I've got a visor that goes down over my glasses. I will keep, like during the summer when at least we used to have rain in the summer. During the summer when there's rain, I would just keep like rolled up rain pants and a rolled up rain jacket in the bottom of my pannier. And in case I was leaving and there was rain that I didn't see in the morning, then I could just throw it on. And honestly, like with good rain gear, you get there, you take off your rain pants and your jacket, and you're dry, and life is good. I've also, commuting by bike, like one of my most used apps is a radar app. I'm just constantly looking to see, okay, well, what's coming? I might leave an hour earlier or an hour later in the morning so that I miss like a rain cell, or same thing when I'm leaving work, leave a little earlier or a little later so that I don't have to ride in the worst weather. But that's just one of those things that Even commuting by bike doesn't mean that because it's rainy today, you're not necessarily riding in rain. You're just dodging it.
Right. Yep. And I noticed the gear that I buy for my cold weather bike also comes in handy for other things. Going sledding with my kids or walking around. It's not just single use. So that's nice. So I think we only have a few minutes left. So let's move ahead here and wrap this up. I think the last tip is creating a goal. I mean, maybe there's people that are listening now or in this room that haven't tried many of these things yet. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be all in. You don't have to sell your car tomorrow. If you commute somewhere that's a good biking distance, you could do it 2 times a week. Dip your toe in the water and see how it goes.
Even around Bexley, like challenge yourself to ride your kids on bicycles to their soccer practice instead of driving them. My family is riding most of the time. If we're taking the car, I always feel guilty because I know people will judge me because I'm always on the bike. But yeah, we'll ride bicycles to Jeffrey Mansion, which is a mile away from our house. My daughter, who's 5 years old, rides her bike to her soccer practice, and I ride my bike next to her, and I can carry a bunch of stuff. And yeah, just challenge yourself to even replace short local trips with your bike. And I think you'll find pretty quickly, 1, you'll enjoy it. 2, maybe the range will start growing, like, oh, we can go a little further. Yeah, we can do this, or it will just start to become normal. Yep. Almost like a habit.
Yeah, there you go. So I think lastly, just some considerations. We don't have the same bike infrastructure yet as some of the cities that Eric just mentioned, like Minneapolis and Portland. But I can tell you that there is a wave coming of a lot of interest. The organizations that we're involved with are asking our local officials to build bike lanes. We're trying to make the streets safer. We are not there yet, but I think we're here tonight to say that it can be done with the right planning, with the right safety precautions, and we do think that the tide is turning. I think there's a lot of cities that have proven that this can work, and I think what I've noticed about Columbus is they take notice and we can eventually catch up.
Yeah, and I will say too, I mean, even though we're not Amsterdam, it is not like riding a bike or commuting by bike in Columbus is this. You don't have to be brave. You don't have to be an exceptional athlete or anything like that. And every road is not Broad Street. There are lots of chill routes to get where you're going. It does sometimes require a little bit of planning, trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I want to get there? Because I don't want to ride on major roads. But getting around Columbus without a car, like there are good options, even though we don't have the best infrastructure or the best transit right now.
Yep. All right. I wanted to leave some time at the end for questions, but also wanted to thank everyone for being here, for considering reducing car dependency. It's been life-changing for me, and I hope you'll consider it too. So anything else you wanted to add, Eric, or should we open it up?
Nothing.
Okay.
I'm ready for questions.
Okay.
So before I pass the mic to the in-person audience, you kind of touched on it at the end, but someone online asked, do you feel safe as a cyclist sharing the road with motorists and automobiles around Bexley and Columbus?
So I'll take it first. So this is another place where an e-bike is kind of a game changer. So this e-bike is a 28 mile an hour e-bike. And generally the roads that I'm choosing are roads that are like 25 miles an hour, maybe 35 mile an hour speed limit. So we don't have a ton of protected bike lanes here where there's actually a barrier between you and the car. So generally if there is a bike lane, there's a car lane next to you and the cars are passing you. But if you're going 28 miles an hour and the cars are going 30, that's not a scary situation. Or if you're going 28 and the cars are going 40, that's still, they're going 12 miles an hour faster than you. Whereas if you're riding a regular bike on those roads, they're flying past you. So an e-bike does make it feel a lot safer because you blend in with the speed of traffic quite a bit. You do have to be aware as a cyclist. It's probably like riding a motorcycle. Just assume that people don't see you. Pay attention. A car might turn out in front of you because when they're looking left for oncoming traffic, they're looking for cars, not bikes. So you just have to be aware of the fact that you're harder to see than a car. But I generally feel really safe riding a bike around Columbus?
Yeah, I think for me, the answer is it depends on which road I'm on. The more I ride, the more experience I get, the more confident I feel, and the more I feel comfortable taking up the space that I should be able to take up on the road. I think also with gear, having one of these on your bike or some kind of way to make yourself seen with clothing and technology. There's even cameras now that are on the back of some of these lights that will warn you when a car is coming. So there are ways to be seen, and I think that's part of gearing up.
Well, one more thing you say too, like about taking space. So have you guys heard about or know of taking the lane? So you've probably seen signs that say bicycle may use full lane. Generally, I don't do that because people will hate me. But there are times where if the lane is really narrow, like let's say there's parked cars, you, and then oncoming traffic, if you try and ride really tight to the right, cars will try and squeeze by. So there are times, as I've commuted more over the last 7 years, you just get more comfortable knowing, all right, when should I take the lane? And I know somebody doesn't want to drive slowly behind me, but if there's no room to get by, they won't try and get by. And so you just get comfortable and learn those techniques.
I agree. All right.
I'm fascinated by one of the components you mentioned, and it's the kinesthetic relationship between riding a bike and getting somewhere with your blood flowing and the endorphins going, right? Is there any data that we could look at that says, yes, there is an X amount relationship between physical activity and actual response time or thinking? Is there somewhere that we could find that data? And second part of a compound question, how do you guys use that, the rush of endorphins, to your benefit when you get there? And can you quantify that?
Yep. Zach, do we get that question? Do we need to repeat it for the audience? Okay. Do you want to take this or do you want
Oh, I was going to suggest you take it.
We dropped a lot of stats tonight. I don't have stats on it. I know they exist. I know I've read studies about the positive workforce benefits when you build bike infrastructure for your employees, like maybe it's covered parking and showers. I know that there's studies about kids who bike to school and walk to school and how they're more engaged and it affects their grades. I don't know what the quantified version of that is. I just know that I have a before and after experience, so it's more of a qualitative response I have. Yes, I don't have the quantitative one though.
Yeah,
Do you have anything?
I don't have quantitative either,
Yeah.
but if you do share it, please do. I've got a spreadsheet of, I think right now it's like 200 bike stats. If I find them, I keep them and save the links, and so that'll be a new link that I'll share or save. But yeah, same thing with Craig. I mean, for me, it's less a rush of endorphins in terms of I get to work and I feel like I was shot out of a cannon, I'm going like crazy, and more of I feel like my mind is in a good place, and I don't have to ramp up into my day. It's not like, okay, well, I need to have a coffee and then really I'll get going. I feel like I'm operating at a high level from minute one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other benefit that just kind of came to mind, which is a tangent, is when I had kids, one of the reasons I started bike commuting is I had less time to exercise, and I do get a boost just in general from exercise. So this was sort of a life hack of I have to get to work anyway, so I should bike there, and then I'll get my exercise and be a dad when I get home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed I've gotten to the point, and this is not a commuting thing, this is just finding opportunities to use a bike instead of driving. So I was playing tennis like a month and a half ago, and I broke my strings, and the place where I get my rackets restrung it's on Bethel Road. It's like way out there. And I thought to myself, like, oh, tonight instead of going on the trail and just riding up Alum Creek Trail for an hour and a half for exercise, I'll just put my tennis racket in a backpack and I'll ride up to Bethel Road, drop it off. And so it was a 30-mile round trip to drop my racket off, and then 2 days later, a 30-mile round trip to pick it up. And that's where like your perception changes. There's no point in my life up until the last few years where I would have thought, oh, that's an option. But that has now become an option for me. Like the idea of riding 30 miles to drop something off, or my car was in the shop up at Easton, and I was ready to pick it up. It was all the work was done, and that's a really nice ride up Alum Creek, and I've got a bike rack on the roof, so I just rode my bike up, put my bike on the roof rack, and grabbed my car. So just perceptions change over time too.
Yep.
Did you have a question back there? I saw you were raising a hand a minute ago. Oh, okay.
He was first.
When you're planning out your trips to go to work, is it kind of like a trial and error to find the safest route, or do you guys use any navigation apps to do that?
I don't use navigation apps. I'd say it's largely trial and error. I mean, Google will try and map you if it knows there are bike lanes. But sometimes the roads that have bike lanes don't even end up being the roads that feel like the most comfortable roads. Like Bryden is a great example of that. Bryden, kind of from Bexley to downtown, it's not bike lanes. You're sharing the road with cars, but it feels really comfortable. So part of it is trial and error. Part of it is talking to other people who are going to the same, like the same bike commute. Like, oh, you take Bryden. I'd never taken Bryden. I'd heard a few people say Bryden's great. And now if I'm going kind of south side of the city, I go for Bryden. I will map out routes sometimes beforehand though. So like I had a Upper Arlington meeting a couple days ago. And so I went on Google Maps and just figured out which roads I would take so that I could spend as much time as possible on the Olentangy Trail on that ride. And so I knew kind of where I was going to turn on the way. I know a lot of people will just have their phone mounted to their handlebars and just use navigation too, though.
But yeah, I like this question because I do like trying different ways to get from A to B, because one of the things I like about biking is I notice the world around me on the way. There are stores and restaurants and parks and things that I didn't know that were there. Like if I was in a car, I would just breeze by them too quickly. Oftentimes, if I'm in a car, I go from A to B and I don't see what's in between. So I like trying to reroute things along the way, either for time purposes or to discover things.
Mm-hmm. Sure. But I will find myself choosing routes when I'm like traveling by bike, where it's not necessarily what's the absolute fastest way for me to get where I'm going, but what's the most pleasant way for me to get where I'm going. And maybe that's 24 minutes instead of 22 minutes, but you're riding along the Olentangy River or something like that. And so that's kind of a nice way to think about it too, is what's the most pleasant way to get where I'm going.
Yep.
Hi, yeah. So my question it was sort of touched on already, and for my sake, it's more about e-bikes, but it definitely applies to acoustic bikes as well. You talked about gearing up for the rain for your body and making sure you feel warm and safe and comfortable. How do you ensure that your bike doesn't get too negatively impacted by the elements? For context, I have a 10-mile bike commute to OSU. I'm a student there. And sadly, there's not a whole bunch of covered bike parking at OSU. There's some, but not enough to make it, reasonable when I'm rushing to class. So how, especially for your e-bike, because I have one as well, how do you ensure that the battery or the motor isn't being damaged on a rainy day, or especially in the winter by melting snow and stuff like that?
Yeah, that is a good question. So for me, I've been lucky. Maybe I'm lucky, or maybe I'm just creative. I generally will find a way to bring my bike in with me. So we work, we have a bike storage room, which is great. Ready Robotics, I would just bring it in and it would sit next to my desk. And generally that's what it's been for me. But for this bike to sit out in the rain is not a big problem. Kind of more of a problem is in the winter, the salt from the roads. And so I would say if you're commuting in the winter, trying to find opportunities where the weather gets above 32 and you can hose your bike off so that salt is not just sitting on the drive unit, sitting in the derailleur and stuff like that. That would be the key thing. And then for me, like with this e-bike, I've had e-bikes that did not have removable batteries. And if anybody's thinking about getting an e-bike in Columbus, I would highly recommend getting one with removable batteries. And basically what that allows you to do is if your batteries go through freeze thaw, that will shorten the lifespan of them. Or if your battery gets really cold, then your bike is just kind of gutless. It's not a 28 mile an hour e-bike anymore. Maybe it's a 15 to 18 mile an hour e-bike. So in the winter when it's really cold, I will take the battery. So I've got a battery here and here. I'll park the bike in my garage at night, but I'll take the batteries in. So when I start riding, the batteries are at room temperature. They're like 70 degrees or so.
One thing on the rain factor is I bought a couple light and cheap rain covers that are nylon, and I stuff those in my backpack. My son does that when he goes to school. If it's going to rain in the middle of the day, he puts his bike on the rack, we put a cover over it, and then after school, he'll either ride home in the rain if it's not too bad, or by then, if the rain has stopped, the cover did its job. Yeah.
You know, another benefit of that too, I know in Europe, a lot of people have bikes that can't easily come up to their like third floor walk up or something like that. And so I think it's much more common there, especially if you have nicer bikes, to put like a motorcycle cover over your bike. So one, that protects it from the elements, and then two, it just makes it less, it's funny, it makes it more conspicuous in a way, but I think it's less conspicuous as a target for thieves as well.
Do you have any suggestions or hacks for when you commute through on Elm Creek through Wolf Park and you encounter a dog off a leash?
I mean, it's funny. I saw one today who started chasing, but his owner called him. There are some cyclists I know who carry mace. I don't know what the humaneness of that is when it comes to animals. What's that? There are some people who have been attacked by dogs when they're riding a bike. So they use it as precaution to protect themselves. I don't personally do that. I haven't had any run-ins, but I know it does happen. Do you have any? Is it?
I would say get the fastest e-bike you can get. I
ride a lot.
Yeah.
I've had it 3 times.
Well, if I think a dog is seriously coming for me, I will get off the bike. I never try to outrun a dog. The dog is fast. And I put the bike between me and the dog. And if you're on the ground, dogs are much less serious.
That's a good point.
But why would a dog? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they might get triggered by something. Yeah.
Dogs are, but it used to be I've been riding along. But I have not had a dog chase me in a long, long time. I think Columbus owners in the ground now recognize that their dog is loose. It's going to be a dead dog. Yeah. Before too long. They're going to be dead.
So
I don't get chased.
yeah,
I've never seen it.
I ride.
I've never seen it in my life.
You've never seen a dog chase a bike?
A dog will chase you. Okay, for a little bit. And then, because, okay, they're playing, they have territory. Dogs have territory. They're more territorial. So you're running through its territory. It will chase you. Dictate. You don't stay in my territory. So it's going to chase you for about a mile. Have no idea if they have. Okay? And then dogs. It says you're out of line. I don't think you're anymore. But it's a territory.
Right.
So I never, if it chases you, just go off and just see what it takes. Okay. Just be curious.
Yeah. Have you guys heard of gravel riding before? So it's basically like a road bike, but you drive out into the middle of the country and you're specifically looking for gravel roads. So you're just riding your bike on gravel roads. It's amazing. I got into it a couple years ago, and I'll do, like I was supposed to do a 67-mile ride on Sunday, northeast, like out of St. Louisville. And so dog encounters are pretty common on gravel rides. Cars don't scare me. I mean, that's why I do gravel ride. There's no cars hardly at all, but you do interact with dogs regularly. And so my main trick on gravel rides is I've just gotten good at, if there's a dog coming, I'll get my water bottle, and I've had to like spray the dog in the face with the water bottle a couple times, and the dog always turns around if you spray him in the face. But that's also, I'm riding at full speed, holding on with one hand, and then spraying the dog with another hand. So you might practice it
Recommend
first.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Chet?
In your guys' experience, going with one car, what are the biggest factors you've seen that have helped families get down to one car or go carless?
The biggest factors that have made it easier for us, or put them over the edge. I guess for us, it was. I guess it depends on your own situation, but it was a budget decision, it was an environmental decision, and it was a taking care of the next generation. Was part of our motivation for that. I don't know if you have different ones.
No, I was thinking about the question differently in terms of what are the factors that enable or make it possible. And so for me, I mean, I'm a big e-bike proponent. I think e-bikes make it very possible because with one car and an e-bike, I mean, I can easily commute 20 miles round trip on an e-bike. And so there are a lot of trips that you would think require a car, but with an e-bike, you don't need a second car. So I think that's one. I think things that were in this deck, like the rise of Uber and Lyft. If we only have one car and I need to meet somebody for dinner, it's not a problem to hail an Uber or a Lyft, and it's a lot less expensive to do that even 10 times a month, 20 times a month than to have a second car and pay car insurance on a second car and gas on a second car and all of that stuff. So I feel like those things, and then, again, Columbus is behind a lot of cities, but we've got Kogos, we've got a bike share, we've got scooter shares. So there's micro-mobility, that last mile is doable. And then mixing that with transit, it's way more doable than I think people realize.
I think a big enabler for us was having a bike trailer. My kids were in a bike trailer so much that we had to get a new one because of the nylon side started to rip because we had used it so much. And that was a big enabler of us not having to have a car, I'd say, when they were young.
There was a comment that kind of relates to this. Someone mentioned that Columbus has an e-bike incentive subsidy. So based on income, people can qualify for $500 up to $1,200 off an e-bike. So that might be something if you're looking at financial decisions, something to look into.
For sure.
Yeah. I think they released the first batch of those about a month and a half or 2 months ago and instantly sold out. I think it was 100 of those e-bike incentives, but I think it's $250,000 that the city has set aside for that. And so there will be another wave coming. So if you're thinking about getting an e-bike, I would definitely look into the Columbus's e-bike incentive. What's that? How would you find out?
They called it Columbus e-bike incentive subsidy. So if you Google that, you should find information.
Yeah.
Well, Craig and Eric, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. And if anyone wants to stick around and ask questions, you're free to do so. For those in the library, the main door is closed, but you can shuffle up the stairs and exit at the top of the stairs. And if you need to use the elevator, just come find me and I'll take you up that way. Thanks again, guys.
All right. Thanks for being here.